Late in the 19th century, Leib Gruber was growing up in Central Europe, in an obscure town in the immense, polyglot, ancient Austro-Hungarian Empire. His father sold fish when he could, but times were often hard. As a young man, the only honest employment Leib could find was carrying people across the nearby river Bug. The customer, male or female, would mount on Leib's back. In his prized boots, the tools of his trade, he would wade out in a shallow stretch of the river and deliver his passenger to the opposite bank. Sometimes the water reached his waist. There were no bridges here, no ferry boats. Horses might have served the purpose, but they had other uses. That left Leib and a few other young men like him. They had no other uses. No other work was available. They would lounge about the riverbank, calling out their prices, boasting to potential customers about the superiority of their drayage. They hired themselves out like four-footed animals. My grandfather was a beast of burden. I don't think that in all his young manhood, Leib had ventured more than 100 kilometers from his little hometown of Sassow. But then, in 1904, he suddenly ran away to the New World. To avoid a murder rap, according to one family legend, he left his young wife behind. How different from his tiny backwater hamlet the great German port cities must have seemed. How vast the ocean. How strange the lofty skyscrapers and endless hubbub of his new land. We know nothing of his crossing, but have found the ship's manifest for the journey undertaken later by his wife Chaya, joining Leib after he had saved enough to bring her over. She traveled in the cheapest class on the Batavia, a vessel of Hamburg registry. There's something heartbreakingly terse about the document. Can she read or write? No. Can she speak English? No. How much money does she have? I can imagine her vulnerability and her shame as she replies, $1. She disembarked in New York, was reunited with Leib, lived just long enough to give birth to my mother and her sister, and then died from complications of childbirth. In those few years in America, her name had sometimes been anglicized to Clara. A quarter century later, my mother named her own firstborn a son, after the mother she never knew. Our distant ancestors, watching the stars, noted 5 that did more than just rise and set in stolid procession as the so-called fixed stars did. These 5 had a curious and complex motion. Over the months, they seemed to wander slowly among the stars. Sometimes they did loops. Today we call them planets, the Greek word for wanderers. It was, I imagine, a peculiarity our ancestors could relate to. We know now that the planets are not stars, but other worlds, gravitationally lashed to the sun. Just as the exploration of the Earth was being completed, we began to recognize it as one world among an uncounted multitude of others, circling the sun or orbiting the other stars that make up the Milky Way galaxy. Our planet and our solar system are surrounded by a new world ocean, the depths of space. It is no more impassable than the last. Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those other worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. In the last few decades, the United States and the former Soviet Union have accomplished something stunning and historic: the close-up examination of all those points of light, from Mercury to Saturn, that moved our ancestors to wonder and to science. Since the advent of successful interplanetary flight in 1962, our machines have flown by, or orbited, or landed on more than 70 new worlds. We have wandered among the wanderers. We have found vast volcanic eminences that dwarf the highest mountain on Earth, ancient river valleys on two planets, enigmatically one too cold and the other too hot for running water. A giant planet with an interior of liquid metallic hydrogen into which 1,000 Earths would fit, whole moons that have melted. A cloud-covered place with an atmosphere of corrosive acids, where even the high plateaus are above the melting point of lead. Ancient surfaces on which a faithful record of the violent formation of the solar system is engraved. Refugee ice worlds from the trans-Plutonian depths. Exquisitely patterned ring systems marking the subtle harmonies of gravity. And a world surrounded by clouds of complex organic molecules, like those that in the earliest history of our planet led to the origin of life. Silently, they orbit the sun, waiting. We have uncovered wonders undreamt by our ancestors who first speculated on the nature of those wandering lights in the night sky. We have probed the origins of our planet and ourselves by discovering what else is possible, by coming face to face with alternative fates of worlds more or less like our own. We have begun to better understand the Earth. Every one of those worlds is lovely and instructive, but so far as we know, they are also, every one of them, desolate and barren. Out there are no better places. So far, at least. During the Viking robotic missions, beginning in July 1976, in a certain sense, I spent a year on Mars. I examined the boulders and sand dunes, the sky red even at high noon, the ancient river valleys, the soaring volcanic mountains, the fierce wind erosion, the laminated polar terrain, the two dark potato-shaped moons. But there was no life, not a cricket or a blade of grass, or even, so far as we can tell for sure, a microbe. These worlds have not been graced, as ours has, by life. Life is a comparative rarity. You can survey dozens of worlds and find that in only one of them does life arise and evolve and persist. Having in all their lives till then crossed nothing wider than a river, Leib and Chaya graduated to crossing oceans. They had one great advantage. On the other side of the waters there would be, invested with outlandish customs, it's true, other human beings, speaking their language and sharing at least some of their values, even people to whom they were closely related. In our time, we've crossed the solar system and sent 4 ships to the stars. Neptune lies 1,000,000 times further from Earth than New York City is from the banks of the River Bug. But there are no distant relatives, no humans, and apparently no life waiting for us on those other worlds. No letters conveyed by recent emigres help us to understand the new land. Only digital data transmitted at the speed of light by unfeeling, precise robot emissaries. They tell us that these new worlds are not much like home, but we continue to search for inhabitants. We can't help it. Life looks for life. No one on Earth, not the richest among us, can afford the passage. So we can't pick up and leave for Mars or Titan on a whim, or because we're bored or out of work or drafted into the army or oppressed, or because justly or unjustly we've been accused of a crime. There does not seem to be sufficient short-term profit to motivate private industry. If we humans ever go to those worlds, then it will be because a nation or a consortium of them believes it to be to its advantage, or the advantage of the human species. Just now, there are a great many matters that are pressing in on us that compete for the money it takes to send people to other worlds. That's what this audiobook is about. Other worlds, what awaits us on them, and what they tell us about ourselves. And given the urgent problems our species now faces, whether it makes sense to go. Should we solve those problems first, or are they a reason for going? This book is in many ways optimistic about the human prospect. The earliest chapters may at first sight seem to revel overmuch in our imperfections, but they lay an essential spiritual and logical foundation for the development of my argument. I've tried to present more than one facet of an issue. There will be places when I seem to be arguing with myself. I am. Seeing some merit to more than one side, I often argue with myself. I hope by the last chapter, it will be clear where I come out. The plan of the book is roughly this. We first examine the widespread claims made over all of human history that our world and our species are unique and even central to the workings and purpose of the cosmos. We venture through the solar system in the footsteps of the latest voyages of exploration and discovery, and then assess the reasons commonly offered for sending humans into space. In the last and most speculative part of the book, I trace how I imagine that our long-term future in space will work itself out. Pale Blue Dot is about a new recognition, still slowly overtaking us, of our coordinates, our place in the universe, and how, even if the call of the open road is muted in our time, a central element of the human future lies far beyond the Earth.
Thank you.